much for that. That's the picture in Europe. What's happening here in America, where, as I said earlier in the program, there are almost 3 million children who have a parent in prison at the moment. Aileen Keays is the project manager for the Children with Incarcerated Parents initiative. She joins us now from Connecticut. Aileen, what's it like for a child in the United States when their parent is sent to prison? What happens to that child?
It's very similar to the UK, it sounds like. Children are often ignored. We focus a lot on the person who is incarcerated, and we really ignore the children. We have tried to pass legislation here for family impact statements, which sounds like a similar effort in the UK, or family responsibility statements, which would describe the potential impact a term of imprisonment would have on the family, most importantly children, so that the courts have the opportunity to consider whether a sentence of incarceration is really necessary for public safety and behavior change, particularly if it's a sentence that may be short. Is it really worth the collateral harm?
And the child, in terms of the social stigma, what happens to them at school? What happens to them in their network? I can't imagine that it's something that any child gets over easily, even once the parent comes out of prison.
Actually, when they come out, it could be one of the most devastating times. It's completely uproots your life. It consumes your thoughts. You're at a constant level of toxic stress, and I'm generalizing, of course, but the stress levels, the trauma, it can be overwhelming, and it can lead to distraction in school. It can lead to learning disabilities, developmental delays, speech and language problems, behavioral issues, which can, of course, cause difficulty with behavior in school. And there is a stigma and a shame, which leads oftentimes to silence. Families may have a spoken rule that you cannot tell your friends or the school that you have a loved one incarcerated because they don't want that child to be bullied and treated differently. Although that can also lead to further silence because then the children aren't sharing what's going on and are unable to gather supports that maybe they would otherwise receive. So it really can be a very devastating experience.
Aileen, is your suggestion then that courts and judges should take into account the children that are left behind when they come up with sentences for certain offenses?
Absolutely, and certainly public safety comes first, but we want the courts to have the opportunity to consider all information that's relevant. And if this is a sentence of 2 months, 3 months, and yet that parent will lose their job, the child may have to move and therefore switch schools, is the collateral harm worth the sentence? Do we really need that sentence? Is that the best outcome for public safety, the community, for children, and that child's health, short-term and long-term? We really want courts to consider all of the factors involved with a case.
Okay, Aileen Keays, thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating to look at so many similarities between kids in Europe and in America, but of course incarceration rates in the US much higher than they are in the EU.